We're going to begin, as we usually do with app development, by building up the basic version of our UI. Now this can be just a very simplistic version to start off with that we can then make a little more complex later on. So we'll accomplish two major tasks in this section, building up the main activity UI and also building an add item page UI. I figure we should probably have an entire page devoted to adding or editing an item, just that we're not dealing with everything inside of a small box. So most of this is going to be accomplished in activity_main. This is going to represent our main list, and then we're also going to have to build up that new page, so add an extra layout file. Now, to start off with, if we switch on over to activity_main, if you don't have that open, then you can find under this folder, under resources, and under layout, should be the only one for now. And we're just going to take a look quickly at the design so that we get a feel for how this page actually looks. So as you can see, there's just a text view, says hello world. That's only a small part of what we'll want on this page. So if you remember from the demo, the way in which we're going to build this is to have a text view up top, which is going to display some kind of a welcome message or a prompt. And then we'll just have a view just underneath here, which is going to contain the list of items. And we'll also have a button down here, which will navigate us to the add page. Now, you may or may not have seen a slightly more complex version of this particular UI, but we can build up the more complex version later. Let's just start simple. So generally speaking, I like to add my items via the text and then use the design to kind of space things out finally and then see exactly how things are going to look. So that's how I'm going to stick with it for now. We do want to keep in this text view, but we'll want to add in what's called a recycler view. So we can use a couple of different list elements. One is literally called the list view. That's a little, not necessarily outdated, but that's a slightly older version. Nothing wrong with it, but I'd prefer to use a more modern version called a recycler view. Now, depending on what dependencies you have installed, you may or may not have access to it. So we're going to start by typing in recycler view, and looks like we don't have it yet. So we're going to have to go over to our Gradle script. We're going to open up the second Gradle file, and we're going to add a dependency down at the bottom. So that dependency, actually we only need the one space, is going to be an implementation very much like this. In fact, I'm just going to copy this and paste it. And then we're going to modify this part here. So we'll actually want, after the support, a recycler view. We'll want -v7, and then we'll want a colon, and then we'll want 27.1.0. Now, unfortunately, no autocomplete, so do make sure you're spelling it correctly. This is going to give this red squiggly line, but not to worry. We'll give the Gradle a resync. Okay, and depending again on which dependencies you have installed, you might again not quite have access to this. So what you want to do, if this is giving you errors, is go to your SDK manager. Okay, we'll probably want to go to the Android SDK tab down here under System Settings, and you'll want to make sure that you have one of the versions of 7.0, probably 7.1.0, and also you'll want Android API 27. Okay, so make sure those are installed, and then we can continue on. So don't worry about these red squiggly lines, they're just giving errors, but there won't be any problems for the project later on. We can go ahead and close that up. And now we should have access to that recycler view. So if we start typing recycler view, then you can see that we have access to this widget. What we don't want is this recycle list view. That's some back-end stuff. So we're just going to set this to what we'll want is a wrap content for now. We'll probably end up fixing that up a little later. Now we also know we're going to want that button down at the bottom right corner to navigate us to the add item screen. So we're going to add in that button now. You can just type it there. We're just going to go with wrap content again for now. Again, we'll probably modify this. So right now, we kind of have all three of our elements here with text view. We have the list up here and the button. Now these are definitely not where we want these, not the right sizes or placements. So we're going to have to add some constraints to make sure everything is in line. Now I am using a constraint layout rather than say a linear layout. So if you're not using constraint layout, I would highly recommend you do that. In order to gain access to it, you'll probably have to add something to the Gradle again. In fact, I have this automatically added down here, this constraint layout. Go ahead and open that, or rather add that, resync your Gradle if you don't have access to it, and head on back to here. Now, constraint layouts are kind of relative. So each element is constrained relative to either the parent or to another element. Generally, we constrain elements to others by IDs, so we're going to go ahead and add an ID to each of these. So if you start typing ID, you'll want Android ID. We'll do the @+ID/ and then just give this a name. I'm going to call this something like, let's call this home title text view. Okay, You do need to make sure your IDs are unique, otherwise you can really call them whatever you'd like. Just make sure there are no weird characters. So we'll give the rest of them IDs as well. We'll give an ID to our recycler view. I'm just going to call this something like to-do item recycler view. And also we'll want an ID for this button as well. So this is just going to be something like our home add button. Okay, should be good enough. And now we can set these constraints. So although this gives us the option to add something into the middle of this recycler view, we won't want to add anything yet. We're actually going to programmatically add items into that. And we'll also specify the view for each item. Also, we'll do a custom layout file for that. So we're actually going to take these constraints. Okay, we'll just copy them. And I'm just going to paste them into each of these sections. So make sure they're just before this last angular bracket here. So now we'll want to constrain items based on their IDs. So we do want the top to the top of the parent, we want the right to the right of the parent, left to the right of the parent, or to the left of the parent. The only one we want to change is we want to glue the bottom of this text view to the top of this recycler view. Okay, so we're just going to do again the simple layout for now, then we can do the more complex stuff later on. So rather than having the bottom to the bottom of the parent, we'll actually change the bottom to the top of, and we'll pass in the ID of this guy. So let's just copy this, and we're going to paste it in here. So we'll have to likewise glue the top of this to the bottom of this guy, otherwise we get some kind of funky behavior. So we're going to change that. We're going to copy this text view up here, this text view's ID, and we're going to paste it in here. Now similarly, actually this should be glued to the bottom of the parent. We'll not actually glue this to any of these, because we want to give this the illusion of a kind of a floating button. Now ignoring the button, this is kind of how things are looking so far. So it's not bad, but it's not quite there. I mean, our list view is very narrow, and there's also this annoying gap here and here. So what we want to do is actually have our text view go all the way to the ends of the parent. Same with our recycler view, and we also want them to stack right on top of each other rather than have that space in the middle. So actually what we're going to do is set our width to 0 dp, and let's set our height to 0 dp as well, and we're going to do the same for our layout width and height here. Okay, and what this will do is it will force our layout width and height to conform to these constraints. So if we check it out, again, we're kind of almost there. So now we have everything going to the edges. Okay, we don't have that annoying space in between the elements, but our text view here is taking up way too much space. We only want it to take up a little bit of room. So that's why we need to apply a weighting here, or a bias. Rather than a bias, we'll do a weight. So if we start typing in weight, we should get one of these options, which is a layout constraint horizontal weight and a vertical weight. What we'll want is to specify a vertical weight. This takes in a number between 0 and 1, with 1 being the entire screen and 0 being none of the screen. So let's say our text view is going to take up maybe a tenth of the screen, so 0.1. And we're going to have our recycle view take up 90% of the screen, so a 0.9. So that's already looking much better. I mean, trying to ignore this button here, but you can see our text view is only taking up a little bit, and the list is actually taking up the rest. Now, our text right now is kind of in the top left corner. That's the default. What we want to do is center this, and we'll want to center everything else as well. Don't worry, our items won't look like this. They won't be this small. They'll actually look a little better towards the end, and then we'll deal with this button here. So what we're going to do is set the gravity equal to center, and we'll do the same for this guy. Gravity, in fact, well, there's no point really setting the foreground. I guess we'll wait for the text views themselves when we do that custom text view to take that into account. So this is just going to center this text here. And now what we want to do is actually move this button, not to the middle, because right now the constraints are saying that it should be in the middle of the screen, but we want to move it to the bottom right-hand corner. So we're going to do this not by using weights, but by using those vertical and horizontal biases. So these will move our item around accordingly. We'll want to set maybe a horizontal bias. So horizontal bias, if we go down, should be this guy. And let's try for something like a 0.9. So this means that it will be kind of 0.9 or 90% all the way to the right. Okay, and we'll do the same for the vertical. So let's just copy this and paste, and we're going to change this to our vertical bias. And we'll also do a 0.9. So let's see how this is looking. So that's pretty good. It's no longer in relation to each of these elements, but rather in relation to the parent as a whole. Now it's looking pretty good. We'll probably want to change the text size because this is kind of hard to read. This actually doesn't have any text at all. So let's give some text to our button and then we'll change the text view size. But rather than specify our text like with our text view up here, you see it says Android text equals hello world. Android Studio actually prefers if we use string resources and call upon them by a resource ID rather than typing in a literal value like this. You don't have to, you can do things this way, it's not technically incorrect, but it's better practice to create those string resources. So we're going to open up values and we're going to open up strings. Okay, and we're going to create a couple of string resources. So our first string resource might contain some kind of a welcome message, so let's actually just call it that. Welcome message. And in my case, I'm just going to say something like welcome to Nim's to-do list. Okay, you can completely customize this if you want. Oh, by the way, it doesn't like special characters or weird characters like this unless they are preceded by the /. Okay, so if you are going to include anything weird, then do add that / in there. So this is the string that I want to display on my title text view. I'll also want one for the button, so I'm just going to copy this and paste. And instead of welcome message, I'm going to change this to our button, or let's call this add button title. In fact, let's go one step further and be a bit more specific. Let's just call this our add symbol. And this is just going to be a giant plus sign. Okay? That should be all the text that we need for now. We're going to head on over to main activity. By the way, think about these as being the resource IDs rather than just a name that we're assigning. So let's get rid of this text here, and we're going to just add it in at the bottom. If I start typing in text, that's the one we want. And as you can see, there are a few options for the string resources. The first is going to be our welcome message. That's the one I want to display up here. And then my button text is going to be my add symbol. So let's head on over and see how things are looking. So the text has changed, we've added some text here, but they're still far too small. So we'll just increase the font size. I'll probably want to change this button size a little bit because I'm not a fan of how long it is. So we are just going to increase the text size first up here. Change text size equal to, maybe let's go with 20 SP for now. That should be kind of big, but we may need to change that later. So it's a little better. And then we're just going to change the actual width and height of this button to display some kind of a constant value. So let's try for 50 dp and we'll see how that looks. So that's looking pretty decent. I'm happy with that size. If you'd like to make it a bit bigger, that is totally cool. In fact, I think I will make mine a little bigger. Let's go for 80. Okay, wow, that's a little too big. Let's try 70 maybe. Okay, and that should look a lot better. So you can play around with the exact layout, like resizing text, for example, making it bold and stuff like that, by exploring some of the other attributes, either through here, viewing all the attributes here, or just kind of starting to type in some kind of name. For example, if I want to access text style attributes, I might start typing in text style. I guess not in the recycler view because that doesn't have any text. But if we start typing, for example, text style here, then I can specify bold, specify text color, and so on and so forth. So I'll leave the exploration of those other attributes up to you, and I'll show you at the end of this section kind of what I will have done. I actually want to launch right into showing you how to build up an add item page, and at the very least I'll get you started, and then you can try to build up the page yourself first. So we're going to go into here. And actually, we'll need an entire activity to add our item. So rather than just adding a layout file this way, we're actually going to go to our main package, so to Java, to our to-do list package. We're going to right-click here, select a new activity. There it is. We're going to select an empty activity so that we can actually have the layout file right there as well. So this one can be called something like add item activity. Okay, and this is automatically going to add an activity add item. So if this isn't popping up, then you do want to make sure generate layout file is selected. We'll finish that. And it should add our add item activity.kt. Let's just close that up for now. And it will also add this activity add item under resources. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and open this up if it isn't already open. And note that there's actually no elements on this page to start off with. So I'm actually going to leave the implementation of this add page up to you guys. It depends how complex you want to make your to-do items. For example, you could just have them as simple as just having a name, or you could add a name and whether or not the item is urgent. You could have a name and a date by which you want to complete the item. So it's really up to you depending on how complex you want to make your app. I'd recommend sticking with something simple to start off with and then making it a little more complex towards the end. But just a few hints to get you started. Feel free to kind of copy and paste some of this code over to our activity add item, at least just to get you started so that you don't have to build up all these constraints from scratch. And also, in order to add item, or rather add text through an editable text box, you'll probably want the item edit text. Where is it? Should just be any one of these. If you go to plain text and you just drag it onto the screen here, this should be called an edit text item. If you go to text here, it's an edit text. And this is a way to prompt the user to enter some kind of text, whereas text views are purely static. We also, well, we've already seen buttons, so you'll maybe need a few of those, maybe one to save the item, one for cancelling to just return to the main screen, and maybe you'll want a text view to kind of display some kind of a title message. Okay, so have a go at it on your own. Also, feel free to modify this in any way you want, increase text sizes, add in different text, add in extra elements, whatever you'd like to make your app as customized to your needs as possible. And in a few seconds, I'm going to show you my fully finished implementation. So go ahead, pause it, do your thing, and then when you're ready, come on back and I'll show you what I've done. Okay, everyone. And now I've finished designing my pages for my activity_main. I added some minor modifications, and also I finished my activity_add item.xml. So the changes I made to the main page were just to change up the size of the button. I also added some color there, change the text color as well, increase this in size, and just increase the size of this relative to this a little bit. You can see the changes reflected in the text. I added stuff like a text color, text style, text size. Pretty much did the same down here. You can actually add your colors as literals here, or you can add resources in values. You can add some color resources like this. It doesn't really matter. I guess this way is the more recommended way, but because you guys are new, it doesn't really matter too much which way you choose. As for the activity_add item, this is kind of what it looks like. I'll show you the design first. I just have my title up here. I have an edit text so that the users can enter some text with a hint. I also added this bit in. You can leave this out completely if you don't want it. This is just a way to add whether the item is urgent or not. The user will just check this box. Then we have a save and a cancel button. Everything is fairly evenly spaced. So if we go over to the text, this is kind of what things look like. I added some string resources for starters. And so this is where I'm specifying all of my texts. I go over to here, I have my text view, these are the attributes. I have my edit text down here. Note that the hint is there rather than a text. So the hint is kind of like a placeholder text. It's a little better to use with with edit texts, just because it's a bit more user-friendly. I have a linear layout in which I placed my text view and my checkbox. And I like using linear layouts to do these side-by-side elements. It just helps me to space things out a little easier. I then have my two buttons down at the bottom. This should be pretty much nothing new. And that is just about it. So I will go over this again right at the end of this very first section. So in the next section coming up, we're going to take a look at how to add all of these items, so the text views, the edit text, everything that we need access to in our main activity and our add item activity classes. And then we're also going to add some listener functions so that we can listen for events such as button presses, maybe when the user checks the checkbox, and so on and so forth. So at the end of that section, we will do a quick wrap up of the day, and we'll kind of go over everything that I've covered previously. But if you do kind of want to use this as a template, totally cool. Just note that I will be providing the source code to you guys anyway, so don't feel like you have to catch up and do exactly what I do. All right? So we'll be right back with those UI activity connections. If you need to do a bit of catching up, that is fine as well. Just take this time to do that.